Rain tapped softly against the cracked window of a dimly lit apartment in East Baltimore. Inside, a young woman stood quietly before a mirror, tying her curly hair into a bun with fingers that moved like clockwork. There wasn't time for makeup or breakfast, not when the weight of 2 jobs, hospital bills, and the care of an 11-year-old boy rested on her shoulders. Her name was Ayla Thompson, and life hadn't offered her shortcuts. But her mother had once told her something that stayed etched in her heart. Even when the world is unfair, never lose your grace, Ayla. That's where your power lives. With a final glance at her worn-out uniform and the time on her cracked phone screen, she whispered a promise to herself. Just make it through today. A decision that changed everything that morning was supposed to be just like any other. But fate, strange and unpredictable, had something else planned. Ayla was rushing through Patterson Park, cutting through it to save 5 minutes on her way to the bus stop. She never noticed the bench until something shiny caught her eye. A leather wallet, jet black, polished, and obviously expensive, lay open like it had been carelessly dropped. She stopped. Inside, several crisp $100 bills, a few credit cards, a metal business card with the name Zane Harrington embossed in bold silver letters. She glanced around. Empty street, no one in sight. Her heart beat faster. That money alone could pay her overdue electricity bill, maybe even buy her brother the new winter coat he needed. Just a couple of hundreds, no one would know, right? She held the wallet tighter, her fingers trembling, but not from temptation, from the weight of a choice. No, she whispered to herself. That's not me. She tucked the wallet carefully into her tote bag. She'd be late for her shift. She didn't care. The right thing was the right thing, whether or not anyone was watching. Struggling but still standing. By the time Ayla arrived at the hospital for her mother's appointment that afternoon, the sky had cleared, but the weight on her chest hadn't. She sat in the cracked plastic chair beside her mother's gurney, holding her hand, eyes tired but warm. You look like you've been wrestling with life again, her mother said, managing a faint smile. I found a wallet today, Ayla admitted. Could have paid off a couple bills with what was inside. Her mother turned her head and looked at her, eyes soft but proud. And you didn't touch a penny, did you? Ayla shook her head. That's my girl. Back in the shadows later that evening, after putting her little brother to sleep and making sure her mother had her medicine, Ayla sat at the kitchen table with a tuna sandwich and the wallet in front of her. She Googled the name Zane Harrington. What she found made her blink. Tech genius, Forbes 30, under 30, estimated net worth, over $200 million. Her hand froze on the trackpad. This man probably hadn't even noticed the wallet was missing. He probably had assistants to replace everything inside. But that didn't change what she had to do. With quiet resolve, Ayla scribbled a note. I found this at Patterson Park today. Thought it might be important to you, Ayla. Then the next morning, dressed in the same janitor uniform, hair tucked under a cap, she took a train to New York City, using part of her small savings, just to deliver it herself to the return address on the business card. She didn't expect to see him. She didn't expect to speak to him. She just wanted to hand it to the receptionist and walk away. She had no idea that her small act of integrity was about to shift the ground beneath her entire life. A fated crossing. As she stood in the sleek marble lobby of Harrington Innovations, wallet in hand, Ayla felt like an invisible dot in a world not made for her. Glass elevators zoomed past her, suits and heels clicking by, no one giving her a second glance. Then the elevator doors opened, and a man stepped out, tall, sharp, dressed in a navy suit tailored like a second skin. Their eyes met, And in that moment, everything slowed. He looked at her, really looked, not like she was a cleaner, not like she was out of place, but like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth and calm. Ayla hesitated, then held up the wallet with both hands. "I believe this belongs to you." Zane Harrington stared at it, then at her, and in that brief silence, the universe exhaled, knowing it had just brought two souls into orbit. For a second, Zane didn't speak. The wallet in her hand seemed insignificant now, compared to the presence standing before him, quiet, steady, humble, and so completely out of place in the glimmering world he lived in. He stepped closer. "You brought this all the way here?" Ayla nodded once, her eyes not lingering on his suit, the lavish lobby, or the polished elegance of the place. "Found it in Patterson Park yesterday morning. Thought you'd want it back." Zane took the wallet slowly, still watching her. "You didn't take anything." "I don't need to," she said quietly, her voice calm but sure. "It wasn't mine." That stopped him. He tilted his head, studying her, not in the way a man sizes up a woman, but like someone trying to remember something important they'd never known in the first place. "Most people wouldn't have done that," he said finally. "I'm not most people," she replied with a hint of a smile, and turned to leave. A subtle curiosity. Zane stood still, staring at the spot she just occupied. Her name, her face, the handwritten note, the way she held herself like someone who had every right to be anywhere, even when the world tried to convince her otherwise. He looked at the wallet in his hand, untouched, and something inside him shifted. "Wait," he called out. She paused halfway to the glass doors, turning slowly. "Let me at least repay you," he offered. "Cash, gift card, whatever you want." Ayla shook her head gently, the same calm grace still in her eyes. "I didn't return it for a reward, Mr. Harrington." Then she turned and walked out of his office, leaving behind only her name, a soft scent of vanilla and rain, and a silence Zane couldn't shake. The man behind the empire, back in his corner office. Zane sat at his desk, but he couldn't focus. Her voice echoed in his mind. "I didn't return it for a reward." It was such a foreign concept in his world. In his line of work, people did everything with an angle. Investors smiled through lies. Business partners took more than they gave. Even the women he dated seemed more in love with the idea of his wealth than the man himself. But Ayla, she had looked at him like he was just a man with a wallet. That evening, he couldn't help himself. He looked her up. Ayla Thompson, Baltimore. It didn't take much effort. One hospital bill, a bus pass, and a part-time work badge in his wallet gave away more than she realized. And what he found broke something open inside him. Her mother, Carla Thompson, former nurse now battling chronic kidney disease. Her brother Jordan, top of his class, loved comic books and chess. Ayla, working 2 jobs, barely scraping by, but no history of debt, no criminal record, no complaints from employers, just quiet survival. She returned a wallet worth more than her rent. Zane murmured, staring at her photograph on the screen, one that looked like it was taken at a church fundraiser. Why? And in that moment, he knew he had to see her again, not as the CEO, not as the millionaire, just as Zane. A gentle collision. 2 days later, Ayla was mopping the back hallway of a boutique grocery store in downtown Baltimore, when a man walked in wearing a baseball cap, hoodie, and sneakers. He looked like a college grad, or maybe someone visiting from the city. She noticed him, only because of the way he kept glancing at her, like he was trying to place her. But she kept her head down, and focused on the floor. Zane stepped forward. "Hey, Ayla, right?" She froze, then looked up, cautious. "You're the guy from the office," she said slowly. He took off his cap, offered a sheepish smile. "I am, but I'm not really here as him. I wanted to see you again." Ayla raised an eyebrow. Why? He hesitated. Because I can't stop thinking about you, about what you did, about who you are. She leaned on her mop handle, wary. You tracked me down. I know how that sounds, he said quickly, and I'm not here to make things weird. I wanted to say thank you, properly, and maybe buy you a cup of coffee, if you're not working after this. Coffee and quiet confessions. That evening, they sat in a small cafe near the waterfront, far from luxury, far from expectations. Zayn told her his name was Z, leaving out his last name, and the empire behind it. Ayla told him about her brother, her mother, and her dream of becoming a nurse again someday. They laughed over the same music they both loved, old school soul and 90s R&B. They discovered they both hated olives, that they both found peace in rain. There was no flash, no extravagance, just two people in a moment that felt safe. But in Zayn's chest, something stirred, something warm and unfamiliar. And Ayla, she looked at Z, and saw someone who for once wasn't trying to fix her, pity her, or judge her, just someone who listened. She didn't know he was lying. He didn't know he was already falling. Zayn had been in love once before, but it had never felt like this. It had only been 2 weeks since that rainy day coffee with Ayla, yet every day since, she lived somewhere just beneath the surface of his thoughts. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but she was unforgettable. There was a stillness about her, like a poem written in silence, and he couldn't look away. The shadow beneath the spark. From the start, he knew there was no easy way forward. He'd lied about his name, pretended to be someone else, but it had never been with malice. It was desperation, to be seen as a man, not a brand, to be wanted for something other than his net worth. He had hired private drivers before. Now, he was catching public trains back to Baltimore, just for a 30-minute walk with her down cracked sidewalks. She didn't know he owned 3 cars, that his sneakers cost more than her monthly rent, that his tech company had just closed a deal worth millions. She only knew that Z made her laugh, moments that melt the distance. They weren't dating, not officially, but the way Ayla would smile when she saw him outside the grocery store, pretending he just happened to be around, that was enough. They'd sit on the hood of her neighbor's broken-down car, eating dollar-slice pizza, and talking about dreams. I wanna open a clinic, she told him one night, her head tilted toward the stars. One where people like my mom don't get treated like numbers. Zayn looked at her, silent. You ever think that big? She asked. He smiled softly. Every day. You just reminded me why. He didn't tell her that he could fund that clinic in one phone call, because he knew, if she found out who he really was, he might lose the one thing he never thought he needed, a woman who loved him with no price tag. The first touch. One evening, they were walking back from a bookstore Ayla adored. It sold second-hand novels, smelled like old paper and coffee, and had a cat named Hugo that followed her around like she was royalty. Ayla was carrying a bag of books when she tripped slightly on the uneven sidewalk. Zayn caught her instinctively, his hands gripping her arms. They froze inches apart, breath mingling. Neither spoke, but in that pause, their eyes said things their lips couldn't. He let go slowly, brushing a curl from her face without meaning to. Sorry, he said, voice a whisper. You always apologize when you catch me, she replied, almost teasing. No, he said, barely blinking, just when I don't want to let go. Zayn's quiet help. He began helping in ways she didn't notice. He anonymously paid her mother's hospital co-pay, slipping it in under a foundation grant. He arranged for Jordan to receive a brand new laptop from a fake school raffle. He even sent her a hardcover edition of The Bluest Eye, a book she had once told him changed her life. When she called him, stunned, saying she had no idea who sent it, he only smiled on the other end of the line. Maybe the universe just wants you to keep reading. Each gesture, each step, it pulled him closer to her,
and further from the lie. A conflicted heart. One rainy Sunday, they sat in a diner, the kind with cracked red booths and cheap coffee. Jordan sat across the table with a comic book, while Zane and Ayla shared fries. She looked tired, like the world was weighing heavy on her again. "Rough day?" he asked. She nodded. "They cut my hours at the diner. Rent's due in a week, and I'm just tired." Zane clenched his jaw. He wanted to fix it, to pull out his black card and make the world stop hurting her. But instead, he reached across the table and took her hand. "I know it's hard," he said, "but you're not alone anymore." She blinked, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She didn't speak, but she didn't let go either. That moment, her hand in his was worth more than any boardroom applause he'd ever received. Ayla's doubts begin. Despite the growing feelings, something began gnawing at Ayla. Z never talked about his past, never about his family. He seemed to show up and vanish at will. He never let her walk him home, and he always paid in cash. One night, she stood by her bedroom window, watching the streetlights flicker as Jordan slept beside her. She thought about the way he looked at her, the way he listened, but she also thought about the way he dodged certain questions. Who was he, really? The spark catches flame. Their next date was unplanned. A thunderstorm knocked out power in Ayla's neighborhood, so Zane brought candles, a takeout bag, and a Bluetooth speaker. They sat in her living room, surrounded by flickering light, Miles Davis playing softly in the background. Zane watched her laugh at one of his stories, and something inside him broke wide open. He didn't want this to be pretend anymore. "Can I tell you something?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. She turned to him. "Always." He hesitated. "You make me forget who I am." Ayla blinked. "Is that a good thing?" He nodded. "It's the best thing." And then slow, unsure, but full of longing, he leaned in. She met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, unrushed, like two waves meeting in the middle of an ocean they didn't even know they'd been swimming toward. The morning after their kiss, Ayla woke with a strange flutter in her chest, a quiet ache, the kind you feel when a new chapter begins, but you're still clinging to the last page. She stared at the ceiling for a while, one hand resting over her heart. She had kissed Z, and it hadn't felt like escape. It had felt like coming home. The garden in the concrete. That weekend, Zane invited her to a hidden community garden tucked between two old apartment complexes in Brooklyn, a spot he'd discovered long ago before fame found him. When she arrived, he was already there, sleeves rolled, planting sunflowers into a small patch of soil. She laughed softly. "You're really out here playing gardener." He looked up, dirt on his cheek, eyes warm, only for the right reasons. She stepped beside him, knelt in the dirt, and helped. For an hour, they didn't talk much, just silence, smiles, shared glances. It wasn't the kind of date people posted on Instagram. It was simple, real, full of the kind of connection that doesn't beg to be seen. It just is. When they finally sat on the bench under a willow tree, hands lightly brushing, Ayla said softly, "I don't know what this is yet, but I haven't felt this safe in a long time." Zane turned to her, heart thudding. "Me either." Unspoken wounds, quiet healing. That evening, Ayla opened up more than she ever had before. They sat on the rooftop of her apartment, sharing a blanket, stars blinking dimly through the Baltimore haze. "My dad left when I was 12, she whispered, eyes on the horizon. "Mom worked double shifts. I practically raised Jordan." Zane listened, not interrupting. "Some nights, I used to lie in bed and imagine a world where things weren't so heavy." She laughed sadly. "But I learned early, life doesn't owe you anything." Zane's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have had to carry so much." She looked at him. "We all carry something. What about you, Z? What do you carry?" He froze for a breath. So many truths pressed against his chest. His name, his inheritance, the company he ran, the empire in his shadow. But all he said was, pressure, expectations, the fear that if I slow down, Everything I've built will vanish. She reached out and touched his hand. Then maybe it's not built on the right things. He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him cracked open. I want to build something real, Ayla, he said. Something with you. The dance that wasn't meant to happen a week later. He surprised her with something she'd mentioned once in passing. She'd never been to a formal dance, so he created one. He cleared out a friend's studio space, hung fairy lights, brought in a Bluetooth speaker, and when she walked in, wearing a simple maroon dress he had dropped off anonymously earlier that day, he was already there, in a button-down and slacks, holding out his hand. "This isn't real," she whispered, smiling in disbelief. "Yes it is," he said. "Everything with you is." He pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other gently holding hers, and they danced slowly under the lights, the world melting away. No titles, no lies, just Z and Ayla, swaying to a love song only their hearts could hear. Ayla's growing doubts. But love, no matter how soft, always makes you look closer, and Ayla had started noticing things. His hand smooth, untouched by labor, his phone constantly buzzing, but he never answered in front of her. His words, carefully chosen, sometimes guarded. That night, after he kissed her goodnight and left, Ayla sat alone in her room, staring at her reflection. Who is he really? The man who brought her joy could be hiding something, or everything. She didn't want to believe it, but something deep inside her whispered, "You've lived in the real world too long not to ask questions." Zane's unraveling back in his penthouse in Manhattan. Zane stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out over the city he once conquered, and now felt small within. He thought of Ayla, of the way she'd leaned into his chest as they danced, of the way her fingers trembled slightly when she held his hand. He wanted to tell her everything. He needed to. But he also knew, if she felt betrayed, he might lose her forever. So he waited. One more moment, one more perfect day. A soft goodbye, that wasn't one. The next day, Zane helped Ayla take Jordan to the local fair. They ate cotton candy, rode the Ferris wheel, and watched fireworks explode above the city. Ayla couldn't stop looking at Z, and part of her hated how much she was falling for someone who still felt like a question. Later, after they dropped Jordan off, Ayla turned to Zane, on the sidewalk outside her apartment. "Z," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something." His heart stopped, but before she could say more, her phone buzzed. Her mother had fallen, and they needed to get to the hospital. The moment shattered. Her question never came, but his silence echoed louder than words. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and sadness. Ayla sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand, her eyes glued to the EV drip slowly ticking down. Mrs. Thompson had fainted from exhaustion, a combination of her chronic illness and missing a dose of medication Ayla hadn't been able to refill in time. Zane, Z, she corrected herself, stood at the door, still in his hoodie and jeans, visibly worried, but unsure if he should walk in. Ayla looked up. Their eyes met. For the first time, she didn't smile. "Hey," he said softly, stepping inside. Her voice was flat. "Thanks for coming." Zane walked over, kneeling on the opposite side of the bed. "Is she okay?" "She will be," Ayla whispered, brushing a curl from her mother's forehead. "If I can keep up with the costs." She didn't mean it as an accusation, but it landed like one. Zane's fingers curled into his palms. "I'll help," he offered gently. "I can figure something out." She looked at him, eyes narrow. "How?" The questions begin. They were sitting in the hospital cafeteria. Later, when the questions finally came. "You said you were just a regular guy," Ayla started. "But you've never struggled with a card decline. You somehow always have money, cash. You dress simple, but your shoes, I looked them up. They're $600. Zane tried to breathe. "Ayla," she cut him off, not angry, just hurting. "And last week, a random foundations paid my mom's hospital bill. The woman at the desk said it was anonymous, but I know that was you." He stared at the table, I looked you up after our first meeting, she said quietly. Zane Harrington, founder, CEO, tech millionaire. You lied to me. Silence. Zane finally looked up, his voice cracking. I didn't lie, because I didn't care. I lied because I cared too much. Ayla blinked. All my life, he continued. People have seen the title before they see the person, the name, the company, the money. No one ever just sees me. You did, and I didn't want to lose that. Tears gathered in her eyes. But you did lose it, the moment you decided not to trust me with the truth. Ayla's heartbreak. She stood, wrapping her coat around herself like armor. You let me fall for someone who didn't exist, she whispered. I told you everything, about my family, my fears, my dreams, and you were hiding behind a mask the whole time. Ayla, please. Zane stood too, voice shaking. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear. I didn't want money to ruin this. She looked at him then, not with hate, not even with anger, just with pain. I didn't need your money, Zane, she said softly. I needed your truth. And with that, she turned and walked away. The days without her, Zane had never known silence could be so loud. Her absence was everywhere, in the empty messages, in the untouched takeout, in the way the world suddenly felt colorless. He stopped going to meetings. His board grew restless. Where have you been? Marcus, his friend and COO, asked one afternoon. Somewhere I thought I belonged, Zane murmured. But maybe I never did. He stared at the notebook, where he had written every little thing Ayla had ever said she dreamed of. A free clinic, a home with a porch swing, a library card for Jordan. He closed it, heart aching. He had lied, yes, but his love had been real. And now, it might be too late. Meanwhile, Ayla tried to move on. She worked, cooked, cleaned, sat through her mother's dialysis treatments. Jordan kept asking if Z was coming back. She always gave the same answer, I don't know. But late at night, she found herself scrolling through articles, reading about Zane's company, seeing photos of him in suits, at galas, on magazine covers. Not the man who danced with her in candlelight, not the man who planted sunflowers beside her, not the man who whispered, "You make me forget who I am." She missed him, but trust once cracked, didn't heal overnight. A letter unopened. A week later, she received a letter, no return address, just her name, written in soft handwriting. She recognized instantly. She didn't open it, not yet. It stayed on her nightstand, like a sleeping confession, waiting to be read. A quiet redemption. Then, one rainy Saturday morning, something changed. Ayla returned home from the pharmacy, to find Jordan grinning. "There's something outside," he said, grabbing her hand. She followed him out to the sidewalk, and froze. It wasn't a car, it wasn't flowers, it was a van, a mobile health unit, fully equipped, fully paid for, wrapped in soft teal and white, with her name written on the side. The Ayla Thompson Free Care Project. Her breath caught. A woman in scrubs walked up to her, smiling. "I was hired to staff it. Full salary, full supplies, 6-month trial, completely anonymous donor." Ayla stared, heart racing. Then she ran upstairs, picked up the unopened letter, and tore it open. The letter. "Ayla, I was wrong, not for falling for you, but for pretending I had to hide to do it. You've shown me a version of myself I never knew existed. One that laughs, plants flowers, watches fireworks, and dares to imagine a life where I'm not alone. I've never loved anyone like this. Quietly, completely, fearfully. You don't have to forgive me, but I had to do something to show you that every word I said was real. Every look, every touch. You said once you wanted to build something that mattered. This is the beginning. Whether or not I get to stand beside you." Yours, Zane. Ayla held the letter to her chest, eyes full of tears. He hadn't tried to buy her forgiveness. He had honored her dream. And maybe, just maybe, that meant his love had never been a lie. The mobile clinic stood outside Ayla's building for 3 days. She didn't go near it. Neighbors came by, marveling at the unexpected gift. Nurses were trained. Equipment was delivered. A banner fluttered in the spring wind. Everyone deserves healing. And still, Ayla stood at her window every morning, mug in hand, staring at it as if it was some ghost of a love she couldn't decide to bury or embrace, because the truth was,
she missed him every second. Love after silence late at night. She would lie awake hearing Zane's voice in her mind. You make me forget who I am. I want to build something real with you. But then she'd remember the silence, the moments he looked her in the eye, while calling himself Zay, the way she had opened herself completely, and he had quietly, skillfully, built a wall of half-truths. Love, she realized, was not just about the warmth someone brings. It was about what they trusted you with, and he hadn't trusted her with the truth. That broke her more than the lie ever could. Zane's isolation in New York. Zane stood at a rooftop event, surrounded by champagne flutes, string quartets, and cold handshakes. None of it mattered. He looked out over the glittering skyline, and saw none of its beauty. He saw her eyes in every shadow, her laugh in every breeze. He'd given her space, sent no texts, made no calls, just waited, hoping the letter would find her heart, the way her honesty had found his soul. Marcus joined him at the balcony railing. You look like a man who built an empire and lost the only thing worth building it for. Zane smirked bitterly. Because I did. Jordan's innocence back in Baltimore. Jordan knocked on Ayla's bedroom door, holding a comic book in one hand and a mug of hot cocoa in the other. Are you mad at Z? Ayla sighed, sitting up in bed. I'm not mad. I'm just hurt, Jordan asked, crawling onto the bed beside her. She nodded. Yeah. Can I tell you something? Sure. Jordan grinned. I asked Z once if he was rich, 'cause his phone looked cooler than mine. You know what he said? What? He said, I'm rich in moments when people smile for real. Ayla's eyes welled with tears before she even realized they were coming. Out of the mouths of children, truth fell like lightning. The clinic's first day, on the clinic's first official day, Ayla showed up. She hadn't planned to. She'd walked by it twice, telling herself she was just running errands. But somehow, her feet led her up the steps and through the glass doors. Inside, bright light, warmth, smiling staff, and patience. People from the neighborhood, who looked like her, sounded like her, who never thought they could walk into a place like this and be seen. A nurse handed her a clipboard. You're Ayla, right? She nodded. You're kind of a legend around here, the nurse said. Your story, it's inspiring. Ayla smiled, heart cracking open just a little. I'm not a legend, she said. I'm just trying to help. Unspoken prayers that night. Ayla stood in the small community room of the clinic, reading Zane's letter again. Under the soft hum of overhead lights, she traced each line with her finger, whispering the words, this is the beginning. Whether or not I get to stand beside you. She closed her eyes and let a silent prayer escape her lips. Not for answers, but for courage. Courage to forgive. Courage to trust again. Courage to love, despite the cracks. Zane's unexpected return. 3 days later, Zane returned to Baltimore. Not with a press team, not with a driver or suit, just him. He walked into the clinic, unsure if she would even speak to him. Ayla turned from the counter and froze. Their eyes locked. Time slowed. He took a step forward, heart pounding. I'm not here to beg, he said gently. I just wanted to see what you built. It's beautiful. Ayla took a breath. We built it. He smiled. A fragile thing. I miss you, Ayla. She didn't respond, just stared at him. You lied to me, she whispered. But you also listened. You gave without asking anything back. You showed up when no one else did. Zane's eyes filled. I should have told you everything from the start. I was just afraid. If you saw the whole picture, you'd walk away. Ayla stepped forward. I didn't walk away because of who you were, Zayn. I walked away because you didn't trust me with that truth. I trust you now, he said, with everything. She looked at him, long and hard, and then she did something neither of them expected. She reached for his hand, the bridge between them. I don't know where this goes, she said, her voice trembling. I don't have all the answers, but I don't want to keep punishing both of us for something you already regret. He gripped her hand tighter, breath shaking. I'm willing to earn your trust back, he said, and I'm willing to let you try. They stood there in the middle of the clinic, the very place where love had been both broken and rebuilt, not as Zayn the CEO and Ayla the struggling worker, but as two souls who had found each other in the wreckage, and still chose to stay. The first time Zayn held Ayla's hand, it was full of longing. This time it was full of promise. They sat beside each other in the clinic's small break room, the silence between them no longer heavy with pain, but humming with something tender, hopeful. Thank you for coming back, Ayla whispered, fingers interlaced with his. Zayn looked at her, his voice raw. Thank you for letting me. But neither of them knew that peace, like glass, can shatter without warning. The midnight call. It was just past midnight when Ayla's phone rang. She answered groggily. Hello, Miss Thompson, the voice said on the other end, tense. This is Mercy Hospital. Your mother's been admitted. It's serious. You need to come right away. Ayla's world tilted. She was up in seconds, panic knotting in her throat. She called Zayn. He answered on the first ring. I'll be there in 5, he said. Don't go alone. The rush to Mercy, the ride to the hospital was a blur of red lights and silence. Ayla sat in the passenger seat, trying to steady her breathing. Zayn kept one hand on the wheel, the other gently resting over hers. She was fine yesterday, Ayla whispered, laughing with Jordan. How does it go bad this fast? Zayn said nothing. He just held her hand tighter. The ICU at the hospital. They were led into the ICU. White walls, cold light, and beeping machines that felt louder than thunder. Mrs. Thompson was unconscious, her face pale, her breathing assisted by a machine. The doctor explained. It was kidney failure, a sudden crash in her levels. They had done everything they could. The next 24 hours were critical. Ayla stood at the foot of the bed, frozen. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. I should have been there, she murmured. I should have seen it coming. Zayn stepped beside her, arms wrapping around her from behind. You've been doing everything you can, Ayla. You've carried this family for years. I'm tired, Zayn, she whispered, breaking. I'm so tired. And he just held her tighter, his own eyes brimming. The long night. They sat in the waiting room all night. Ayla's head eventually rested against Zayn's shoulder. His hoodie smelled like cedar wood and safety. She didn't sleep, just closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of his breathing keep her calm. Around 4 a.m., she looked up at him. Why are you still here? She asked softly. He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Because this is what love looks like. A promise in the dark as dawn broke, painting the sky in soft shades of ash and rose. Zayn took her hands in his. If she makes it through this, he said, I want you to move in with me, you and Jordan. No more split rent. No more sleeping with one eye open. I want to give you peace. Ayla stared at him. And if she doesn't make it? She asked, voice barely a whisper. Zayn's throat tightened. He reached out and cupped her face. Then I'll be your peace. A life-changing decision. The doctor returned mid-morning. She's stable, he said. It was close, but she's responding to treatment. You got here just in time. Ayla broke down, sobbing into Zayn's chest. He held her, letting her weep, his own relief washing over him, like a tidal wave. In that moment, something inside Ayla shifted. Zayn wasn't a billionaire anymore. He wasn't a secret or a mistake. He was her anchor. The new beginning. 2 weeks later, Ayla, Jordan,
and her recovering mother moved into Zane's quiet brownstone on the edge of Central Park. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't sterile, it was a home. The first night Zane made dinner, it was terrible. They all laughed harder than they had in months. And later, after Jordan went to bed, Ayla found Zane in the kitchen, elbows on the counter, looking at an old photo of his parents. "You okay?" she asked. He turned to her, his expression soft. "I am now." She walked over, wrapping her arms around his waist. "This doesn't feel real." He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. "That's because it's finally right." Rain fell softly that morning, light, rhythmic, like the sky was breathing. Ayla stood by the window of Zane's brownstone, sipping tea and watching Jordan play chess with his grandmother at the kitchen table. Laughter echoed behind her, laughter that had once been scarce, fragile. Now it was part of the air, part of the healing. But something was stirring inside her. She had fallen in love twice, once with Zane, the man who made her laugh in the dark, and again with Zane, the man who stayed through the storm. Zane's quiet plan. Zane had always believed in grand visions. He could pitch billion-dollar ideas to rooms full of stone-faced investors. But proposing to Ayla, that was different. It had to be more than a diamond or a dinner. It had to reflect her soul, her journey, her strength. So he began planning, not a moment, but a memory, the notebook of dreams. The day started like any other. Ayla woke up to a note on the pillow. "Meet me where it all began." She blinked, heart skipping. Where it all began. Then it hit her. Patterson Park. She got dressed in the maroon dress he once gifted her, the one from their private dance. The sky was overcast, but warm. Spring was beginning to bloom, just like the love between them. When she arrived at the park, it was quiet, just the whisper of wind through trees. Then she saw it, a bench, the one where she'd first found the wallet that changed everything. On it sat a black leather-bound notebook with her name engraved in gold. She picked it up slowly, hands trembling. The pages within inside were pages filled with her dreams, written in Zane's handwriting. Every single thing she'd ever said she wanted. A clinic for the people who get ignored. A home where her brother could sleep without hearing sirens. A garden, somewhere quiet, with sunflowers and lemon trees. A library card in Jordan's name. A porch swing, creaky with time, kissed by evening sun. Each dream had a small note beneath it, already in motion, working on it. "Yours whenever you're ready." And the last page. "I didn't fall in love with you for your honesty, Ayla. I fell in love because you made me want to be honest too. If you'll have me, not just for now, but for every what if, what's next, and even the storms." Then turn around. The proposal. She turned, and there he was. Zane stood under the tree, holding a single sunflower. No suit, no cameras, just him. The man who danced with her under candlelight. The man who carried her mother through hospital doors. The man who saw every version of her, and stayed. He walked to her slowly, eyes never leaving hers. Then he dropped to one knee, not with a velvet box, but holding the notebook. "This," he said, his voice thick, "is my heart on paper. I could have given you a diamond the size of your fears, but that's not love. Love is remembering the quiet things, the late night cries, the way your eyes light up when Jordan smiles, the moments you thought no one saw, but I did." Tears filled Ayla's eyes. He opened a small side pocket of the notebook and pulled out a simple ring. Elegant, vintage, not flashy. "This ring," he added with a smile, "it belonged to my grandmother. She was the strongest woman I ever knew, until I met you." He looked up. "Marry me, Ayla Thompson, not because I can give you the world, but because we've already built one together." Her answer. Ayla didn't speak at first. She was crying too hard, but then she knelt down too, meeting him at eye level, and whispered, "Yes," not once, but again, and again. "Yes, yes, yes." A celebration of souls. They didn't throw a lavish engagement party. Instead they invited close friends and neighbors to the clinic's garden. now blooming with sunflowers and lemon trees. Mrs. Thompson read poetry. Jordan played his favorite superhero soundtrack from a speaker. Everyone wore yellow, the color of hope, of warmth, of fresh beginnings. Zane stood with Ayla, under a makeshift arch built from recycled wood and community love. And when he kissed her that day, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was earned. Ayla stood barefoot in the garden behind their brownstone, dew-kissed grass beneath her toes, the sun rising gently over the horizon. She was wrapped in one of Zane's hoodies, clutching a mug of tea. Behind her, through the kitchen window, she could see Jordan laughing with Zane over burnt pancakes. It was quiet, not the kind of quiet that comes from emptiness, but the kind born from peace. She smiled. She had never imagined her life would look like this. Not when she was mopping floors, not when she was skipping meals to buy medicine, not even when she found that wallet on the bench. She had returned it expecting nothing, and instead she had found everything. A home made of love. Their wedding had been small, but sacred. No designer gowns, no towering cakes, just loved ones, sunlight, and sincerity. Mrs. Thompson walked her daughter down the aisle, slowly, carefully, but with pride in every step. Jordan stood at Zane's side, as best man, beaming with a grin that could light up cities. They had exchanged handwritten vows under the same willow tree from their first garden date. "You didn't save me," Ayla had told Zane. "You saw me. That's even rarer. You gave me something to believe in again." Zane had replied, "Not a dream. Us." And when they kissed, it wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of the rest of their life. The clinic grows months later. The Ayla Thompson Free Care Project expanded to 2 new locations. The waiting room stayed full, but so did the hearts of those who walked through its doors. Zane kept his name out of the headlines. When asked who funded it, Ayla always gave the same answer: a man who believes love should leave the world better than it found it. She still worked at the clinic 3 days a week, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. To her, healing people was never about prescriptions or policies. It was about presence, about looking someone in the eye and saying, "I see you," just like Zane once saw her. The porch swing. One lazy Sunday, they finally installed the porch swing she had dreamed of for years. It creaked softly as it swayed, kissed by the golden hue of sunset. Ayla curled into Zane's side, her head on his shoulder, their fingers intertwined. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Sometimes love speaks loudest in silence. Jordan ran barefoot in the yard with Hugo, the rescued cat, and Ayla's mother sat in a lounge chair, reading aloud from her favorite Maya Angelou poem. It was simple. It was soft. It was perfect. Full circle. 1 year after that fateful day, Ayla returned to Patterson Park, not as a struggling daughter or tired cleaner, but as a wife, a healer, a woman who had learned the most profound kind of love, the kind that grows through truth, forgiveness, and choosing each other every day. She sat on the same bench where she had once held a stranger's wallet and a decision in her hands. She ran her fingers along the wood, smiled, and whispered to herself, "You had no idea what you were finding that day." Legacy of Love. Zane later published a private memoir, not for profit, but for Jordan. The title, She Returned a Wallet and Found the World. Inside, he wrote, "In a world where everyone takes, she gave. In a moment that could have changed her path, she stayed true to herself. That's who your sister is. That's who I fell in love with." Jordan kept it on his nightstand, reading it when the world felt too loud. Final scene. Years later, Ayla stood in front of a classroom at a community college, teaching young women how to care for patients with dignity and empathy. Behind her, photos of the clinic decorated the wall. A quote hung in the center of the room: "Real wealth is in what you give, not what you keep." After class, she walked into the lobby and found Zane waiting for her, holding a sunflower. "Some things never changed." "Coffee?" he asked, smiling. She took the flower, leaned in, and kissed his cheek. "Always." As they walked away, hands laced together, hearts still beating in rhythm. The past followed them like a gentle breeze, but so did the future. Final words, full circle closure. She had returned a lost wallet without taking a penny, not knowing the owner was a young millionaire. He had everything, but he had never known love until he met the girl who asked for nothing and gave him everything.